Hello everyone, I'm Colin Brett.
Hi, I'm Karen Pratt.
Our job today is to give you some ideas on coach supervision and how we practice that, to show you 2 supervision conversations with 2 coaches, and to discuss each supervision conversation after we've had it, and then to invite the supervisees to comment on their experience. So to start with, Karen and I are going to share some ideas about what we think coach supervision is, how it works, and therefore how we teach it.
So I know some people listening in see a lot of similarity between coaching and supervision,
Yes.
because there's similar techniques in terms of listening and questioning, but they're very marked differences between coaching and supervision. So what are some of the key things that stand out for you?
Okay. So I think that the language that we use in coaching and the language we use in supervision are very close. So are some of the concepts. A big difference is that we almost talk about something, so a case, rather than talking about our experience of from inside. So in supervision, I sometimes think, let's put it on the table and talk about it out there rather than my experience of it, which of course plays a part and is some of the process. But for me, it's more an analytical consultancy thinking about the work and then my part in the work.
Yeah.
And so another piece, or almost the second half of the conversation, is around, and where am I in this? And my development as a coach. I assume that every coach knows what to do,
Yeah.
but sometimes something gets in the way. So the personal intrudes on the professional, and it's my job as supervisor to help the coach think that through.
Indeed, and the bit that fascinates me is the concept of parallel process. And the way I've learned as a supervisor to use myself to see what's going on in me, that I'm invited into a dynamic with my client, the coachee, and potentially that's going to be exactly the same as what's going on with the coachee's client, and potentially even with the system.
Okay.
And to catch that and consciously work with it and mirror a positive parallel process back,
Okay.
so that the client, the coachee, can experience how it is to be doing it differently, that they can take back to their client.
Okay. So it might be that there's something in the client's system that the client picks up and brings into the conversation with the coach, and the coach picks that up, and it, so to speak, gets picked up by the supervisor who notices a shift in self, thinks what it might be, turns it round into a positive parallel process and gives it back, so that it goes down the chain like a domino effect.
Absolutely.
All right. Okay.
And I think at times I might, depending on the experience and the development of the coach, I might talk about that explicitly, and other times I might do that within myself, and as you said, turn it around, offer it back in a positive way.
Okay. So you think you take a different approach to the same thing depending on the developmental stage of the coach.
And I'm wondering what you think about how you work differently with coaches at different developmental stages.
I think there are different needs.
Yeah.
So the first and one stage is, what do I do, and am I doing it okay? And after that, it's much more, or it becomes more about who am I, and who am I as a coach, rather than what do I do. And the focus is no longer so much on the other as it is on self. So I think that the further we are down the developmental process, the more it's an existential piece of work rather than a behavioural one.
Indeed, and that makes me think of the key issue, that piece that we listen for. What's this really about is what I often hear myself saying. What's this really about? And it is that existential piece. Who am I in my work rather than how am I doing my work? And I think that's a mark of supervision as well, to explore at that level.
So how am I getting in the way, in a way? Or what is it in me that's being, that's coming live in an unuseful way? Which might be belief, for example.
Or what am I not letting myself know about me and my potency as a coach?
And how come I'm giving away my potency? How come I'm disabling myself in this moment with this particular client?
And it's often that, isn't it? It's coaches really do good, powerful work, but there's something about one particular client, and it's that piece. What's coming alive in me that isn't usually there?
Yes. It's almost as if because of this, with this client, my history is entering my present. And I think both of us have a strong belief that the supervision intervention is actually fateful. So we make a small shift in the supervision conversation that in the long run shows very clear differences.
Indeed, and I think the key piece for me in supervision is also keeping the bigger picture in mind, the system. So particularly when people are working in organizations, the multiplicity of levels of contracting, and particularly on the psychological level. So it's that, I'm thinking of the seven-eyed model. It's not just me and my clients in the room as supervisor and coach, but what are all the other dynamics as well, and the system particularly, and the context, and the different contexts, the diversity of context in which coaches work, and how might that, the culture of the system be impacting their work. So it's really that big picture look on the work that we partner with as supervisors.
Yes, the metaphor of leaving the dance floor and going onto the balcony and looking at the movement, the direction, rather than the detail. What really fascinates me is the idea that we pick things up and respond or adapt to them without knowing we're doing it, and how that plays out in a conversation. So words create worlds. And over the years, I've become hugely aware, or at least conscious of, the language that I use and the conversation that this creates, and the impact of that also on an unseen level.
Indeed.
And Karen, if you had one thing that made supervision for you, what would it be?
I think what really impacts me at the moment in my thinking about supervision is teasing out more and more the difference between practice analysis and supervision. And the sense of practice analysis, what did I do, how could I do it differently? But that's almost the sense of moving the pieces of the puzzle around. I'm informed by Kolb's learning cycle, and particularly James Zull's transformation line.
Yes.
And I think thinking about the work and what people did in the work is keeping it quite passive in the learning cycle, but prompting people to cross the transformation line and make new meaning. Brings it to a different part of the brain, according to Zoll.
It does.
And I think it really is rewriting people's scripts.
Yes.
And they are changing in their professional identity.
Yeah. So
and that's at the heart of supervision.
The change, however small, but a change in professional identity.
That's a great way of naming it. Yeah.
I absolutely function on the belief that we are who we think we are. And what supervision does is say, basically, and in your work as a coach, who do you think you are? And how do you then act that out?
Yeah.
So what's the change in your thinking about yourself that we can do here
Yeah.
that will have the effect that you want to have going forward?
And that just strikes me, as you say, that as such a different belief about supervision, because many people come in the first session and they're thinking it's a checking up on really punitive, I'm going to catch you out piece. And what we believe about supervision is an expanding, growing, ever-evolving professional identity.
Yes.
And what a difference those two points of view are.
I think that it's the curse of the word supervision.
Yeah.
It has that hierarchical,
Yeah.
parental piece. And the way I think we work is that we don't have any hierarchy at all. Some people know more about one thing and other people know more about the other.
Yeah.
And the purpose is absolutely appreciative and developmental.
And collaborative, equal, but with different functions potentially.
There we go.
Yeah.
So what we could do now is have these two supervision conversations and think then together about how our philosophy plays out in the conversations.
Let's do it.